class.
Everybody that I'm
going to be a lot
expecting
more
to visit.
fun, exciting classes that you probably sit in this great class. Interesting stuff. It's going to be way more interesting. We've got a great group of speakers today. Before we get to Ali, I just want to give a quick introduction to Ian Klugman over here, who is the president of Communitech. How many know what Communitech is or refer to Communitech? A few. So for those who don't know, Ian's going to quickly tell you a little bit about himself and Communitech.
Sure. Thank you. And I even watched How to Talk Like a Pirate yesterday, but anyways. A couple of things. Just this is a phenomenal program, phenomenal opportunity. Virginia and Sean and Jesse, great resources to help you with your projects and get a company started. This community, I think, and I think you're going to hear that from people like Ilya and Ali about the unfair advantage that exists in this community with all the resources and support that are available to help you. And I think the one thing to tell you is really take advantage of them. Sean and Jesse are going to do a really great job of trying to get you out and get you involved in things and help you, bridge and find resources to help you with whatever you're struggling with or whatever you're trying to do. But really take advantage of the networks they're going to open up for you, because at the end of the day, those are critical to building successful companies. So we've got a bunch of breakfasts that we run. We have something called Entrepreneur Week, which is coming up November 16th to the 20th. The events are free for you guys. I know they're going to be working on coordinating, making sure that you've got access to those. We bring in speakers throughout the year. And then we've got something called the Venture Services Group, which is a group of entrepreneurs who are spending some time with us coaching teams and coaching companies as they get their businesses started. So, anything we can do to help, our services are free for all of you. Anything we can do to help, from trying to work on figuring out how to build a prototype to figuring out how to build a business plan, we're happy to do so. Take advantage of great resources in the community and have fun. Thank you.
And so for the first year of VeloCity, the entrepreneurs and residents at Communitech were probably our best resource for mentors and gave us a tremendous amount of assistance, or gave students a tremendous amount of assistance with their ideas. So, and they're located in the Accelerator Center, so not that far a walk, maybe in February, it's a little chilly, but right off campus there in the R&T Park. So very convenient, and you're not going to find a better group of people to talk to about your ideas. So to start, as long as we're okay with the...
Yeah.
All right. I'm not going to I'll let Ali talk more about his background and who he is, but needless to say, we're very excited and happy to have Ali here to talk to you guys about himself and about Well.ca. Take it away, Ali.
Cool. Hey, so I'm Asaria. I'm the CEO and founder of Well.ca. Well.ca is a startup in Guelph, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we do. But the topic of my talk is about, I've kind of been doing this experiment for the last while. I've been meeting with as many companies as I could for the last 2 years, and just trying to learn what makes good companies good. So I've just been watching a lot of companies and trying to figure out what patterns are, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the stuff I've seen over the last 2 years. It's cool to be in this room. This was actually my room in Comp Eng. This was our homeroom. And there's a whole bunch of cool stuff. Like, I just remember all these stories from here, so it's really cool. And my UWID still works on the web, so that's pretty exciting too. But yeah, actually in this room, if you Google my name, you'll find an old, this is what I was most well known for a long time ago, was I hated computer engineering here. I just hated it so much, because I just felt like I came to school here because I wanted to go to the toughest program because I thought I'd learn the most, and I found it was just like the most work, but I wasn't learning stuff, and I hated that, because I like to do stuff, I like to build stuff, and I don't like to just do make work, right? And I imagine a lot of you guys are like that. So I actually became famous for doing something in this room. I started a survey. It was called, and it started this thing which was to it actually ended up revamping ECE, the Electrical and Computer Engineering program here. What I did was I did a survey, and I pretended, I didn't tell the people, the class, that it wasn't actually an official survey, and which is actually unethical. You can't give surveys in a university without approval from some ethics thing, right? Because I don't know. So I lied, and I applied it from head office, and I asked a whole bunch of questions about the program. It was like a 5-page essay. I actually got the prof to dedicate 20 minutes of the class because he thought it came from somewhere Ohio. and I asked a whole bunch of questions, asking people to rate the program. And the main question I asked, there was this key question I said, is if you were to ignore the co-op program in computer engineering, would you recommend the program to your friends, right? Because the theory behind that question was that the co-op program makes Waterloo so good, it biases people's perception of the actual quality of the program. So I said, if you could take that out, is it a good program? And I think 86% of the people said no. And that just like blew the minds of the department, because I published all the raw data of this. It's on uwstudent.org. If you look at, if you do ECE survey, you'll find it. It made a whole bunch of news outlets because people were like, the most famous program in Canada, because I just published it everywhere. And people both hated me or really loved me, and the department really took it seriously. They wanted all the raw data. I actually delivered to them. The head of the department went through every survey and read all the really nasty comments that people wrote in like the long answer sections. And then a whole bunch of committees were formed to reinvigorate the program, make profs better, and a bunch of that stuff I'm really proud of. But the cool thing, the reason I'm telling you the story, partly because it was in this room that it happened, but the reason I was really interested in it was because it was one of the first things I did where I just got so pissed off that I just wanted to do something, and it was kind of wrong, right? Like I was breaking a rule by doing a survey, but I just wanted to change something. And the neat thing that happened was I thought everybody would receive it really with a lot of like pleasure, right? I thought people in the program, like the class, would think this is awesome. Ali's making the program better. He's going to make less make work so we can spend more time doing things and learning stuff. Like I was able to do in the survey to figure out the average number of hours that people were in class, and it was like, or did schoolwork in computer engineering. And it was like an insane number, right? It was like, it would be illegal by any labor laws, the number of hours that people did, right? And so I thought, oh, everyone in the class is going to love me because they're going to like maybe cut down a lot of the make work, give us more time to actually build stuff on our own free time. Because that was a big complaint and a result from the survey was that they worked us so hard that we had no time to build stuff on our own, which is what engineering should be about, in my opinion. So I thought that. But the thing was the class itself. There was a really vocal minority of people who were so pissed off at the fact that I was trying to change things. And this has been a lesson for me over my whole life, is that I think one of the biggest things I've learned over a great part of my life is that any time you try to do things where you try to make change, you try to make an impact, you'll always, inevitably, get a lot of pushback from people. And it's just this weird way in which I think societies work, and societies do this maybe to protect themselves from bad change. But it's just a really frustrating thing, and I think it's kind of it connects to running a startup, because I think when we look at building companies and people imagining wanting to build this huge company and the kind of really glossy, fun stories that we hear, we often don't hear all the negative stuff, because nobody wants to talk about that. And it's interesting, because a big warning, and it's neat to start a talk like this with a warning, is that a big warning is that if you're ever going to do stuff, you're going to get a lot of pushback. It's hard. There's so much stress. People will insult you, and you got to have the drive to push back at all of that. And it's hard. Everybody questions it, and everyone I've talked to talks about the same thing. Every successful entrepreneur I've talked to. Let me tell you a little bit about Well.ca. So Well.ca is Canada's largest online health and beauty store. So right now we sell about 19,000 products on our website. That's like 3 times as many products as most drugstores sell. And we ship everywhere in Canada for free. So you can it's like kind of like standard e-commerce, right? Stuff you'd find at Shoppers Drug Mart, we ship to your home. And people buy privacy products. We have a whole beauty section where people buy makeup. Just tons of products. Actually, green and natural is huge for us. It looks like just a link on our website. It's actually our top-selling category. We're the largest green and naturals website in Canada that sells green and natural products, so like organic skincare and that kind of stuff. But the key to Well.ca, oh, that worked on the PDF, is that box that's on the front page of our homepage, and it's our value proposition to our customer. It's us telling our customers what's special about Well.ca, and it starts with free shipping, right? So we ship anywhere in Canada for free with no minimum order. So you can literally buy a single tube of toothpaste in Nunavut, and we'll ship that for free. And people do that, unfortunately. We have a ton of selection, right? So if you go to Shoppers Drug Mart, you might find 30 deodorants in a big Shoppers Drug Mart. If you go to our women's deodorants, you'll see 94 deodorants. So we just carry everything. And so if you look at our top sellers, we sell a whole bunch of stuff that you've never heard of because people can't find it anymore. Our biggest seller, like last week, is Salon Selective's like hair goop, like the stuff, because they discontinued it. Salon Selectives is like a discontinued brand, but we have a ton of it. We have access to it somehow. So people buy these things that nobody's heard of, because people can't find it. And they're like, this is the only hairspray that works for me, and then they buy like 50 bottles at a time. So we can't publish our top sales data. Like Rogers Media was asking for that at one point in time. And we can't publish it because it's like silly things is our top sellers. And a lot of like the normal big sellers in drugstores don't sell really well. But this is the topic of what I want to talk about. What makes a company amazing? And this has been my research project, and I kind of want to present some of the things I've learned from looking at companies all across North America that I've kind of been studying by meeting with them. And this is what I do, is I always just try to set up meetings and get right into people's offices and ask lots of questions and watch. And these are some of the things I've learned. The first thing, and this is like across the board, every company I've seen that does well is that they put their customers first. You'll just see this, and it's hard. Sometimes in tech companies, the customer is very distant from the actual company. Sometimes it's an abstract notion, the notion of a customer. But every CEO that I've spoken to in what I would consider a successful tech company is always talking about their customer, always trying to learn about their customer, always trying to figure out how they can offer more to their customer. And that's just, I think that's key. Some of the things that Well.ca does in that regard is we do free shipping, and that's customers just love that. That's our message to our customers, where we're saying we're trying to build a service that customers want, not something that's profitable on our end necessarily. That's not how we came at it. Obviously, we need to make profit, but first we're trying to figure out how can we make something that's super valuable to our customers. We do things like we don't time our calls. So people call in at our 1-800 number, which we publish on every on every page on our website, and they'll just want to chat. And we actually want to talk to them. We learn about our customers that way. A lot of older people just want to have no one to talk to. Some people are actually trapped in their homes because they have mobility issues, and they just want someone to listen to them. And sometimes we're that person for them. But that's our chance to demonstrate what kind of company we are, and we love that. We're looking for opportunities to demonstrate our values, our actual ethics and values. And so getting to chat with people and learning about their families and that sort of stuff is one thing. But on the other hand, it's just a nice thing to do. I mean, if you had a fixed store where people actually came to your store and they started telling you about your family, you wouldn't say, can I help you with anything else? And just like hang up the phone. You just try to be a nice person, and that's what we try to do. We pay for all returns, so when people want to return things to our store, you can return it. I think it says 60 days, but we'll take it like a year. If you want to return stuff, we'll accept the return. We'll actually pay for the shipping, and people love that. But a cool thing that we do, and I think one of the most important things that we do in terms of customer service is this silly thing that we do. On every invoice, we say, thank you for your order, but we handwrite it. So there's just handwriting on every single invoice that comes from our website, even though we're shipping hundreds and hundreds of orders a day. People are just blown away by that. We get so many calls and emails. People just can't believe that a big e-commerce site would go through the trouble of writing handwritten notes to every customer. And then, yeah, I mentioned we have a 1-800 number on every page. If you have any questions also, just feel free to cut me off too. One of the big things I've learned, and it was really surprising for me, was about corporate transparency. Every great company I've seen is incredibly transparent about how they run their company, what's happening internally, and what they show to their staff, but also what they show to the world. So a couple examples. When I went to Facebook, everybody at Facebook could meet with Mark Zuckerberg and ask him questions at these big company meetings. Google was really famous for doing this. They just book a room and anyone could ask anything, even if it was crazy. Everybody in the company would know what was presented at the last board meeting. Usually that stuff's kept secret. I went to Zappos. I went to visit Zappos, and here I am. They don't know who I am. I could be a competitor. They give me a visitor's badge. I'm getting a tour. They give me a full hour tour, and then they sit with me after. And while I'm walking, they're like, our sales yesterday were, and they actually have the actual number of what their sales were yesterday. Not just like last month or last year. It was yesterday's sales. They said, we had 491 returns yesterday. Like, they were just willing to show everything to someone that they didn't know. And in the beginning, you'd imagine when you're starting a company, why would you ever show things? Why would you ever give away information? But one of the things that transparency does is it makes you accountable, right? So all of a sudden, when you're transparent, you can't do shady things. You have to be thinking, what are people going to think? Because they're going to know what we're doing. We don't hide things. But also it builds trust. And that's something that's really important internally in Well.ca, but also externally. So one of the things we do at Well.ca, there's irony to this, right? I'm talking about transparency and then I blurred out but this is actually an internal document at Well.ca. Every single staff, that means every person who ships boxes, answers phones, even the person who brings muffins to us in the morning, gets an email every week that says every single line of profit that happened the previous week. So that's how much we made last week, exactly how much we paid on tape, on boxes, how much we paid in salaries for shipping people, and how much we paid in customer service. And then we build this big pie chart, and we're like, this is how we make profit. This is how we slice up the pie. Everybody knows where every single dollar in the company happens operationally. And that's crazy. And it's week to week. So you can see, great team, great job team, you've lowered your cost by 1%. That increases our net profit by 1%. Everybody can see that. I don't know any other companies that do it to this degree with weekly data. And originally this was just data that was coming to my desk, but I was just like, why can't everybody see this? But what it ends up doing is that first everyone's like wanting to have training on learning how to use this spreadsheet because it's this huge like hundreds of lines, right? Because there's so many things we measure every week. But then after they got training, everybody's now invested in trying to build up our bottom line because they can see the profit on the bottom and they can see where they fit in that. So now all of a sudden people are like, hey, we could save on boxes if we did this. And then they're trying to adjust the numbers. And that brings everybody into having the same goals as what normally management would be worrying about. And also it builds trust, right? So everybody in our company believes that they're invested and they know everything that's happening. I can't hide anything because it's all published to them weekly. One of the cool things that I also learned, was very recent for me, was the idea of the long haul. When you start a startup, you will be surrounded with people who are talking about quick sells, right? They're always talking about the word exit, which is a horrible word, right? It's like, what's your exit strategy? Which means, I'm sure most of you know what that means, but it means like, how are you going to sell the company? How are you going to make millions of dollars from this? And that's all people are talking about before they've ever published anything. Before they have an actual customer, they're talking about who they're going to sell to. Google's going to buy me for this amount of money. And it's a horrible way to run a company because imagine having a set of staff, like you hire people. Let's say you hire 10 developers. And all they hear you on your phone calls and when you're meeting with VCs is how you're going to sell the company. Nobody wants to work for a company where you're just trying to flip it and make a bunch of cash and then send them off to another company. I've heard of a famous entrepreneur from the Waterloo region told me about, he hired a whole bunch of people from a big competitor and then started making a small company, and then sold to the big competitor. Everyone who originally worked for him didn't want to work for the big competitor, and now they're being bought by the big competitor and returned back to them. And so we had to keep that really secret, right? But when I went to, I remember this distinctly at Zappos, is when I went to Zappos, I remember Tony Hsieh saying that we're going to do this for the next 100 years. That was his message to the company. Like he was building a company that was going to last for 100 years. They were talking about, and everybody, like if I'd meet people in the halls, they're all like, we're going to build an airline at this year. And like everybody was on message with these crazy ideas that were really long term, and everybody's invested in the company and to each other. And I think all the great companies that I've seen that have done really well have that philosophy of, we're not trying to flip this in a couple years. But Zappos did sell to Amazon. One of the cool things I think I'm really passionate about, and every successful tech entrepreneur that I know, is this notion of constantly innovating. This is a huge challenge for Well.ca because there's such a tendency at Well.ca to just become this retail company, right? We just sell, like e-commerce is not new. It's been around since the 90s or maybe before. We could just have a bunch of landing pages with checkout and focus on retail, focus on narrowing our margins and shipping more efficiently to build value. And I think Amazon's a good example of a company there where we still think of Amazon as a tech company, even though the majority of their work is logistics, right? And that was something I wasn't prepared for. When I started Well.ca, I was a software guy. I was thinking of lines of PHP code. It was written in PHP code. I apologize. And like the MySQL database and all that stuff, and how I was going to make sure that it would deploy. It was a technology problem for me. But right away, I mean, we have 30 staff right now. So many of them are involved in how do we pack boxes. So much of our thought is about how do we more efficiently pack boxes, because that's our business, right? And I think it's really, when you have the pressure of investors who are trying to see how you're going to build out your bottom line, and when you're really cash strapped, which Well.ca was in that situation for a long time, it's really easy to just say, hey, let's stop hiring developers and just focus on selling stuff. And I think all the great companies that I've seen just fight that tendency really strongly. So you'll see at Well.ca is we have a really big tech team, much bigger than what you'd need for a standard e-commerce company. And that's strategic for us. But also, if you hear the conversations in our tech team, everybody's talking about, you'll always hear this at every end of a meeting when someone demos something, is they say, we could do it this way, but that's how everybody does it. How do we take it to the next level? How do we start from a company where we're just following other companies and imitating other companies, right? In the beginning, if you're making an e-commerce company, you should probably just look at Amazon and try to copy everything they do, right? But then, how do you go from that to how do you become the company that Amazon's now looking at and trying to learn from? And I think that notion of constantly wanting to build the next big thing, to change an industry, is what I've seen across the board at all the great companies I've seen. Leanness and agility is something also that I wasn't expecting to see in a lot of companies, but I've seen it across the board too. And I purposely capitalized those letters. because, and I'll tell you a little bit about leanness and agility. I'm just going to look at my watch to make sure I'm not over time. Is that you'll see now, especially with the economic shift, you'll see a lot more companies, a lot more tech companies talking about how do we be more cash efficient? How do we not do what they did in the boom in terms of just overspending, hiring way too many people? People are talking about leanness and frugality, right? There's this term called the new frugality. And I think that's interesting. I think the challenge with this overemphasis on frugality is also how do you make sure that you're also taking big risks and making big change while still saving money and not wasting money. And I think agility is kind of a solution to that problem too. So most of you might have heard, is about like agile software development. And the neat thing I think about the term agile versus frugal is that agile isn't saying you can't take bold steps. What it's saying is you got to be quick on your feet, right? So when you're writing software, instead of investing really deeply in building an operating system, you invest really lightly into 30 things and then see which ones are working and then invest more into those things. So what's happening is you're able to quickly change what you're doing. And I've been able to see that in all the great companies. You'll see when Facebook is like, it's a huge company now, but they're able to do quick shifts. And I think that in order to be a great company, you have to be able to do new things really quickly. And in order to do that, you can't make deep investments. It's just too much of a risk. But the reason I capitalize those is that the neat thing that I learned at Well.ca is that we have this weird divergence, right? We have a whole bunch of software developers who sit in front of computers and write software. And then we have a whole bunch of people who ship and answer phone calls who are on actually timed, right? Like people who answer phone calls have to come in at a certain time because there's phone calls starting at that time, whereas software developers might come in at any time they want. And you'd think that it would be the two sides of the company would be run completely differently, right? Like the way you manage software developers and the way you encourage innovation in software development is completely different than distribution. But it's actually, the terms they use are the same. So lean, if you Google the term lean, is actually a distribution word. And lean, there's many subsets of lean. Some of the things I can show you is Kaizen, which is a Toyota kind of word which talks about continuous innovation and continuous improvement. And something called 5S, which is huge at Well.ca. And the neat thing is that you'll see this neat parallel between the way people who ship boxes or do distribution or move units of things in a warehouse, which is called logistics, have the same philosophies as software developers, just in different words. And you'll see this in all parts of Well.ca, is that there's always this leanness that just manifests itself in different ways. And I'm really interested in that. So I really recommend, if you guys are software people or engineering people, is to pick up a book on how logistics implements agile and lean. And there's a lot you can learn from that. We've learned a lot from that. One of the things I've seen across the board is the notion of measurement. You'll see this at every awesome company. There's just tons of dashboards. The dashboards are these things that you can just log into. It might be a website, or it might be something on your computer all the time, or it might actually be something printed on Bristol board. But it's all the data you need to know. If you go to Well.ca, in addition to that spreadsheet, which is just like a ton of data, we have maybe 50 different dashboards that we're always looking at, and everybody in the company has access to. And we're spending a lot of software work, a lot of our development work, in looking at the data we have and understanding it. And you'll see that at all big companies, is they're just taking as much data that they can handle and trying to learn from it. And some of the ways in which Well.ca learned from that, one of the examples I sometimes talk about is that when we started at Well.ca, when I started Well.ca, I imagine our customers would be like me. That's a common mistake people do, right? They're picturing their own situation. So I said, young university students, don't have a car, guys, because guys are on the internet more, that's who's going to shop at Well.ca. And we ran the company, and we started asking, Mr., like when you have your address, we said, are you Mr. or Mrs.? But actually, we want to know your gender, right? Now we have to ask doctor, because a whole bunch of doctors complain so much if you make them say they're Mr. and Mrs. Yeah, and then there's reverends and captains, and it gets really complicated. But yeah, so now we call all those other, because we don't know. So we started collecting gender data. And then we also asked for your age of birth for your password, but then we could actually figure out how old you are, obviously, right? And we started learning right away that our customers were exactly opposite to what we thought. They're overwhelmingly female, so it's like 65% women. If you look at our beauty section, it's like 89% women. And then they're much older than I thought, right? So our average customer is like 35 to 45, a demographic that I know very little about. And then we're like, okay, people are going to be buying after work, right? They're home, they're shopping for stuff. But our peak buying time was at 3 p.m., which is like in the middle of the day or like the end of the workday. And so when you start taking all that data together, right? So you're like, it's all women, or almost all women. They're older than we think, 3% peak. And then we thought, okay, they're going to be rural, right? They don't have access to a Shoppers Drug Mart. Most of our customers are in Toronto, and they're right next to a Shoppers Drug Mart. And so we're just like, we're scratching our head, but we're gathering as much data as we can. We're talking to our customers, and what we're starting to learn is that our customers are not people who can't find a drugstore and don't have a car and are looking for a cheap alternative or something like that. Who our customers are they're young moms who work and are busy, and driving to the drugstore and leaving their kids at home or bringing them is such a chore that they just like everything delivered for them. What that meant for Well.ca is, we have to market this in a completely different way. Well.ca is now about convenience. It's not about saving money. If you look at our website, we don't talk about discounts and that sort of stuff. All we're talking about is how we can make your life easier, because that's what our customers see our product as. We wouldn't have known that if we didn't spend a lot of time looking at the data and really asking our customers. I have a couple more slides, but again, if you have questions, let me know. One of the things I saw across the board too is this neat concept, is that this notion of always wanting to win. When I worked at Microsoft, I remember early when I was there, I got invited to one of those company-wide meetings. They had to like rent a football field to fit everybody in, right? And Bill Gates was up there, and they were kind of interviewing Bill Gates. And one of the things I thought was crazy was this was near the end of Bill Gates' like Microsoft career, right? He had officially said he was going to retire, I think the next year or something like that, or maybe he had already retired. He's a fortunaire, like he's like billions and billions of dollars heir. But the notion of Google came up in the little interview, and he was so pissed off about Google. Like, you could see in his face, like when they brought it up, and the fact that the search engine was doing better than MSN, I think at that time it was called, he was like so visibly angry. And what I saw, and you'll see this in every really successful startup entrepreneur that I've seen, is that they just really want to win. And it's kind of scary. I think I'm really interested in the notion of ethical business, and I think, like people who are more interested in like being really ethical and kind usually aren't the kind of people who are really driven and want to win. But you have to find some sort of balance. I mean, I've seen this everywhere, is that when a startup entrepreneur sees a competitor that's doing better than them, they just spend all their energy trying to win. If they see an opportunity, they want to pursue it like really deeply. If they have a product, they don't want it to be the second best. It's got to be the first best. And that's something you'll see at Well.ca a lot, is that we're just always saying, how do we make sure that if we enter into this category, that we're not the second best, because we're just not interested in being second best at anything. And that permeates throughout the companies. You have a whole bunch of nice people that are really, really competitive. It's not flipping. Let's see what happens. Oh, there we go. This is another neat thing that I learned that was counterintuitive for me, is that when you hear media press about successful startups, it's all about this thing that happened overnight, right? It was in the garage last week, and then this week it's making $1 billion. Nobody talks about all the time that happened before that, because nobody wants to, because the story is much more interesting if it happened overnight. But a big message I've heard over and over is that overnight successes take years. And that's something I've seen over and over. An example might be, like, for example, postrank.com. Eli is here from PostRank, and he'll be talking, I think, at the end of the day, is that one of the cool things about PostRank, if you look at it, is I remember when it was starting, and it was pulling in data. But look at the company now. It has years of data, literally years of data, that they'd been storing real time, but now is archived. If you ever tried to start a startup that was doing something even similar in the space as PostRank, you'd be starting from scratch, whereas they have years of data. But beyond the data, there's years of things that they tried to do that were mistakes that they learned from. So when you look at a company and you see, okay, here's what they do. Well.ca sells a whole bunch of products. I'm going to find those products. I'm just going to copy what they do. I'll do free shipping, et cetera, et cetera. It looks like you can copy a company really easily because you can see all the things that they do, but you don't know all the things that they tried to do and then stopped doing. There's a whole bunch of learning that happens in there. And I think that's a big lesson, is that if you ever want to be really successful in a business, this patience is really hard to have. But you have to develop it. It takes a long time to build things. Good entrepreneurs want things right away, but at the same time, good entrepreneurs know that I think it takes a while. That's something I've seen over and over. One of the cool things I've seen, and this is something you'll see at Well.ca too, but I've seen it across the board, is that whenever good startups accomplish something, they want to 10x it right away. For Well.ca, I remember one of my first jobs was I worked at ESQ, Engineering Science Quest, here on campus. It's all those bratty kids who are learning about engineering that you'll see in the summers. So I was one of the counselors for that. And I moved up as a counselor and then some sort of leader. And then I was a director. And the budget for ESQ was, I don't know if they want me to tell you, but I think it's like $250,000. And I was so proud of myself. I was like, this is amazing. I'm managing a $250,000 budget. I couldn't imagine a bigger number. When I started Well.ca, we started really small, we worked really hard, and all I could think about was, I just want to make $1 million. I can't imagine an amount of money more than $1 million. Like, that's crazy. I'll just quit after $1 million, right? Like, I'm so happy. you get to these points, and you'll see this for our whole company, because no one could imagine at our company making $1 million in revenue and having like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of customers. But you get to that, and all of a sudden, when you cross it, nobody even celebrates, because it's like it was such an old goal. Like, it was such an absurd goal. It's like, of course we want to get to 10 million now. Of course it's 100 million. No one ever wanted to get 1 million. That's nothing. And I saw that at Zappos. Zappos was making $1 billion when I met them, and they were talking about making 10 billion, right? It's just like, it's insane how driven and how deeply successful companies want to keep growing. There's a real tendency to get to some point and just want to stop, but you won't see that at great companies. They're always figuring out how do you take it way beyond the next level. And that hunger I've seen just in every entrepreneur that I've seen that's done well. So for example, if you look at Well.ca, here's the number of products. I just published this today, actually, it's live data. This is the number of products we have on our website, right? So September 9, it says 19,000. We're trying to add another 19,000 products right now. Like, we're never satisfied with the number of products we have. We just have like tons of people. We're actually outsourcing it now. We might be outsourcing to India just because we're adding products so fast that we can't get a team of 80 people so fast. And so you'll see this notion at Well.ca is that when we started, having 1,000 products was unimaginable for us. And now 1,000 products is just like such a silly small number, right? One of the things I've seen at every amazing startup company that I've seen is that they always talk about how they don't market. So Zappos is really famous for, I went into Zappos and they walked me through the offices, and you'd think, this is a $1 billion company, how much are they going to spend on marketing, right? They didn't have anybody. Like, there was nobody doing marketing. There was 2 guys buying like Google AdWords, and then another guy lying down in his office, like I think he was taking a nap when I was like, and that was their marketing department. Like, and it was crazy, right? Because like, how do you get to be that big, right? Like, think about Facebook. Every one of these companies, when I talk about what's your marketing strategy, either they don't know the answer or they just blatantly say, we don't have a marketing strategy. And I think that's connected to a lot of things, right? Like, you can afford not to have a marketing strategy if your product is so amazing that people want to discuss it. But it also, having a marketing strategy sometimes can be really bad for your company, because what happens in marketing is that marketing companies often just want you to spend a certain amount per month, right? So you're spending $10,000 a month, and then that's converting to this amount in sales. But you're addicted to constantly paying. It's just like this weird funnel that you're always trying to create. And if you ever turn off the beginning of the funnel, the end of the funnel gets cut off. There's this tendency, when you try to market in the standard way of marketing, of thinking that you can buy customers. It just doesn't work that way. And I think if you ever cap yourself by restricting your company's ability to market, you'll learn new ways to build customers that are much more loyal and aren't part of this thing where you're buying and selling, arbitraging customers. You're actually building a customer base and a community. I think this is one of the most important things for Well.ca as a company, and I've seen it in successful companies. And I think if you ever try to build a company, you have to get to the point where you can say things like this, is that whereas most companies, not startups, are trying to figure out how to expand their bottom lines, you'll see most startups, every time they can increase their margins, like the amount of money that they can make, they're trying to figure out how they can reinvest that in the customer. So taking that to the highest degree is when you don't charge your customer anything but offer them a great service, right? Or you do things really boldly. So as soon as Well.ca made enough profit to do free shipping, we started doing free shipping. And as soon as we make enough profit to pay you for doing shipping, we'll pay you to do shipping. Like, we'll always take it to that nth level where we're not worried about how much money we can make. We're worried about how good of a service we can make. So you're always investing back. And that's because you're investing in your company. And people are investing in your company because they want you to do this. It's hard, though, especially when it's hard to find investors. It's really hard to figure out how you can make your service way better. How can you just start pouring money into your customers in a good way? I'm not saying in a bad way. I mean, I don't mean you should waste money. But I mean, how can you build something that's way better than what you have now when you're capital restricted and nobody's supporting you? The cool thing for Well.ca now more than ever for our company, we recently raised a round of financing. The head of the financing round that we did was Jordan Banks. He's the ex-CEO of eBay. We have the head of Facebook, head of Kijiji, and a whole bunch of really cool people, industry insiders that are on our board or on our investment group. And all these people are always meeting with me and trying to drive Well.ca in doing more, not making more. Giving more to our customers. How can we be even more bold in the way that we deliver value to our customers? And you need to have supporters and investors that want you to do that. So here's a cool graph of when we launch free shipping. You can see what happens. That was huge for us. It was a crazy day. When we turned that on, we were so scared. Like, what's going to happen? What happens if everybody in Nunavut starts buying one toothbrush? And it was a frightening day. But it's been the key driver for our growth in the last I would say 6 months to a year. I think one of the most important things for a startup you have to be doing is you have to be constantly executing. You have to constantly be winning. And the reason for this is that it's this catch-22 problems with startups. If you want to hire the best people, you have to be executing. To get the best people, they have to know that your company's winning, it's growing, it's doing amazing. Well.ca gets about every week I get an email from other startups in Toronto, from people who work in other startups in Toronto wanting to switch over to working at Well.ca because they've heard about Well.ca's growth. I'm not sure if my company grows much more than some of the companies that are leaving, but there's a lot of hype around Well.ca, I imagine. And that's something of what they're looking at. But we also hype a lot about, Well.ca talks a lot about company culture and what kind of company we're trying to build. We're really public about that. And people are attracted to that. But it's this catch-22 problem. It's how do you hire the best people to build the best company that's always executing if you can't get the best people in the beginning? The same thing happens with investors, right? You've always heard this, right? The only way you can get great investors is when you're already doing so well that you don't need investors. But you'll see this always, is that the only way to get a winning team and winning investors is to already be winning. And it's a difficult problem, but it's something interesting to think about. Something that I'm really passionate about is this idea of not just creating a product, right? There's this easy tendency, the standard business is just to build a product. People will buy it. How much are they willing to pay for it? I'll charge a little bit more or a little bit less than that. And it's just like a standard product model. But when you look at great companies like Apple, like Facebook, like Zappos, and you look at the community around those companies, the way people talk about the brand is not the way you'd normally talk about, like, my Dyson's really good, it vacuums really well. No, they're like, people are blown away. So Well.ca is not at that point. But you'll see some of the things like when people are on live chat, they say really, really nice things to us. If you ever look at our customer testimonials page, you'll see it's like overflowing with people. Like this is actually from our current page on Facebook. So check this out. Okay, so this goes. This site is the bomb diggity, especially for people in wheelchairs who don't get out often. Shout out Janessa and Nicole. That's like 2 customer service people. I can't remember a name. This other person, I don't know. Amazing. It's like, who talks about a company this way, right? It's really weird, but people feel this really emotional attachment. and then our response is, thanks, Kathy. We think you're the bomb diggity, too. Right? It's like, and see, like the way people are. So it's like, I'm addicted to this website. All of my customers in my head sound the same right there. Yeah, but there's like, if you check out our Facebook thing, you'll just see the way people pour love about Well.ca, the way people talk about better companies than Well.ca, like Zappos and that sort of thing, is not like this was a great value for my money. That's not what they're saying. They're like, I'm blown away, and I'll do anything for you. And I think that's really important to try to figure out how can you build a company that has that. Some of the things often one of the negatives when we talk about startups is it's when you build a startup, and if you're an entrepreneur starting a startup, it's really hard to do other things, right? So a lot of my classmates from my class in ECE have 2 kids now. They're married. They're like starting paying off a mortgage in a house. And like, I have a pen pal in Italy that I haven't written to for a year. Like, that's like the depth of my relationships right now, right? but I kind of, the way it connects is that one of my friends who now has 2 kids was telling me, he was meeting with me, he was telling me about how my life is nothing like his, because he was telling me about the time when he had his first kid. And like the doctor delivered the baby into his hands and the warm feeling he got and like unwrapping the baby and that feeling. And I was like, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's how I felt when I first got my MacBook in the mail. I was like caressing it, feeling but that's the kind of thing. You need to build a MacBook where people will replace their family with it, which I've done, right? And this is my last slide, is about investment in staff. So this is our team right now. This is, I think, 24 of the 30 people that work at Well.ca. One of the big things I've learned, and the biggest thing that I've been trying to learn, and I'm constantly investing in learning, is how do we make a better workplace at Well.ca? It's the most important thing. It's the top of mind thing at Well.ca. Before, how do we sell more, or how do we build more efficient software? It's like, how do we make sure that everybody who works at Well.ca is super happy? When I started Well.ca, I didn't realize that would be important. I thought that it was all about software and distributed systems. How can we make the architecture more efficient? We built so many levels of caching, and we were really proud of it. If you look at my early blog posts at Well.ca, they're about our caching infrastructure. If you look at my late blog posts about Well.ca, they're about team building, right? And you can see that reflects the shift in the perspective of me and the company. So we do a whole bunch of stuff, right? So we don't build an amazing team by paying everybody really well. We're actually pretty well known, famous for paying really poorly, unfortunately. But we're working on that. But it's actually neat to not be able to pay people well because you have to figure out other ways to entice them, right? But some of the things that we do is like we're constantly surveying our company internally, saying what things can we work on. We have a really strong set of values that we publish to all of our staff, and we're always publishing those values back to the staff and saying, where are we not doing well in this? The question we ask in the beginning of meetings and at every interview when we're hiring staff is, how can we make Well.ca the kind of place where people want to come in to work in the morning? When I worked at RIM, that was the last place I worked before I worked at Well.ca, before I started Well.ca, is I left because although I loved the engineering problems that I was working on at RIM, I was doing some awesome tech stuff. Like, I'm really proud of that stuff. I didn't want to come into work most mornings. I just it was work, right? And I wanted to leave at the end of the day. I remember some days I didn't want to, I had nothing to do, so I'd just be sitting around surfing, trying to make it become 5 p.m. so I could leave, right? And you guys know that feeling. I actually had a discussion with my manager. I was like, can I work 4 to 5 days a week and I'll take 4/5 the salary? Because I believe this. For the rest of my life, I thought, Ali, I'm never going to be able to find work that I love, so I'll try to get as much time for my hobbies, because that's where you can only have passion with your hobbies. It's completely flipped over for me. I used to hate those people who said that they love their jobs, because I thought it was a lie. There's no way you could love your job. That's absurd. But people now ask me, they say, how many hours do you work a week, Ali? Are you working 80 hours or 60 hours? That's crazy. And it's I can't even answer that question, because the place I just came from, when I drove over to Waterloo this morning, was from the office. I was sleeping there last night. I have a bed upstairs. I lived in the office for the beginning of Well.ca for about a full year. Actually, my apartment was above the office. I had to go down the stairs to take a shower. People came in early. They could see me in my pajamas. But I was in the office. You can't measure how much time I was working because it was my life and I loved it, and I didn't want to stop. I was always thinking about it. I would stay up writing algorithms. That's the kind of job you want to have. And that if there's any reason to start a company, it's obviously, you haven't seen a single slide with a dollar sign on it, right? It's obviously not about money. It's probably not even a good way to make money if you do the odds. But it's this chance. It's this chance for me and for people who I think come from the same perspective, of people who want to build stuff and want to make change. It's this chance to, for once in your life, love your job. And that feeling is what we're trying to transfer throughout our company, is how can we make this place not like RIM and not like Microsoft, right? That's my talk for the day. That's my email address. Feel free to email me at any time or call me. I think my phone number's up there too. But email is obviously better. And yeah, I'd love to learn about the stuff you're working on. If there's everything I can do to help, if you have any questions or anything like that, send me an email. And yeah, I can take questions now too. Go ahead.
When you talk about transparency, did you mean internal transparency?
Both. So one of the examples for external transparency is that when we hired a new corporate development person, so the first senior hire we ever made at Well.ca, and he found this new lead with the people we buy vitamins for, and the vitamin manufacturer called this guy and he said, I can get you 80% off vitamins if you buy these short-dated vitamins. They expire in 1.5 years instead of 2 years. And so my corporate development person is like, we're going to make a huge fortune. But the philosophy we have at Well.ca is whether or not we're publishing this to everybody, we want to run a company in a way that we wouldn't be ashamed of showing how we do anything in a company. So we're not ashamed of the margins we make on our products, the way we source them. At Well.ca, our customers are constantly trying to figure out, how do you do free shipping? What's the trick? You must be doing something evil in the back end, right? And so it's really important for us to have a transparent philosophy. And so you'll see at Well.ca, if you ever come into the office, and you're all welcome to come in at tours, you'll see there's always people coming in on tours. We bring our competitors and our friends and our customers, we show them everything that happens in the company. And having that transparency was a huge shift for us. But what it makes you do is you become accountable and you build trust.
How did you secure your startup financing?
Oh, that's a good question. I think there's some talks about financing, so I purposely didn't talk about financing too. We're kind of a prototypical angel-funded company. So we did 2 angel financing rounds. So it was bootstrapped in the beginning. Then we took an angel round from the Maple Leaf Angels, which is the biggest angel network in Toronto. And then now we have a bunch of private angels that we pulled together ourselves just through our contacts. Awesome guys. The whole world of angel financing is it's a whole talk on its own. And I mean, I have all these stories about talking to VCs and being rejected, and so sometimes that's the talk I give. But I think just to answer your questions, yeah, we were angel finance, which we love and we're really happy with. Go ahead, Mick.
I have a question. You had put up a slide there about marketing, and I wasn't really clear on what you were trying to say. Effectively, what I thought I heard you say is, don't worry about marketing. But one of the biggest problems, as you know, for particularly our engineering culture in Canada, is that they don't market well. They don't get the word out well. They don't. So I just didn't quite understand what you were.
Yeah, so some of the statements on my slides are obviously a little bold, right? Like you obviously have to know how to market to run a company. You can't just like build it in your basement and never show it to anyone. It's not going to do well, right? But does anyone else have an answer to that question? Or do you want me to try to take a stab at that question? My answer to that question is that I think that there's a lot of startups that come to me for advice and they say, I've built this awesome product. I just don't know how to market. If I can figure out how to market, I'm going to make a fortune. And truth is, like 99, actually 100% of the cases that I've seen, the problem isn't that they don't know how to market. The problem is that the product isn't good enough that it sells itself, right? So I think when I say don't market, I mean have this philosophy where you build a product that's so good that it markets itself.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think too, a lot of the companies that you mentioned in Well.ca as well, you're a marketing company,
Yeah.
right? Like everything you do embodies marketing, right? So you're completely customer centric, you're customer focused, you're listening to your customers, your product's being developed based on customer feedback. You do talks like this, and just listening to you makes me want to buy a gazillion products. Like you've taken what marketing used to be as a separate function. There used to be this huge like marketing versus engineering clash culture. You've embraced it. All of your employees market for the company. They just, because you treat your employees well, they tell everybody how well you treat their company. You're treating them, and then people want to buy from Well.ca. So I think that's the fundamental shift. I don't think it's not marketing. I think it's.
Yeah, I think you're right, and that's me being facetious, right? It's probably like me saying don't do any engineering. It's like obviously it has to do some engineering, right? But it's just I think what I mean by don't do marketing is you have to look at marketing differently, and I think you can't do marketing the way standard companies do marketing. The good thing is most startups can't afford to do marketing the way standard companies do marketing, so it puts you in a good position because you avoid a bunch of mistakes.
Do you even have inventory, or do you keep a little? How do you deal with?
We have inventory, so we ship everything. Although we're starting to enter in some dropship agreements to sell things like we're doing a bunch of neat stuff right now. Well.ca, to add all those SKUs, we have to go into a bunch of new categories. So we'll be selling electronics and stuff like that. But right now we ship everything, so we keep inventory. But if you look at lean, capital L, on Wikipedia or something like that, one of the big things one of the lean philosophies is this idea of Toyota started doing this. I think they were the first in the car world. Was that they make manufacturers bring just enough parts for them that they need for that day. So instead of holding a bunch of carburetors, they tell the carburetor manufacturer, I'm making 10 cars today, I want 10 carburetors today. And when I make 10 tomorrow, I want. And so we do that. That's called just in time. So Well.ca is really good at making sure that the cycles between when we get deliveries from our manufacturers and our distributors are really close to the cycles when we sell them so that our inventory is minimized. And that's because we don't have a lot of money.
How did you see the opportunity in founding an online drugstore? Was it a personal experience?
So I was doing e-commerce. When I left RIM, I started doing some e-commerce consulting, so I knew the space. And I knew that there was no one doing it, but that drugstore.com in the States was doing relatively well. So I knew that there was an opportunity. My dad's a pharmacist in Guelph. He actually owns the largest independent pharmacy. So I actually knew the industry really well. Like I knew the names of distributors. It's a big challenge. As Well.ca enters into electronics, like we're like, okay, we want to sell, let's say you want to sell TVs. Who sells TVs? Like, where do you buy them from? I knew those answers in pharmacy, and that's like I knew that the answer is McKesson in pharmacy. It's the largest health company in the world, but nobody's heard of them. So that was a big advantage for me, is that I had like a family background and just dinner table conversations about it.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you so much, everyone.
Great talk. Thank you very much. And there's so many great points you made. We recorded this, so hopefully you guys watch it again because we're taking notes. A ton of great points and a true success story from Waterloo. Maybe not making $100 billion yet, but running a company the right way and doing the right things. So, Ali, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.